Hello everyone, and welcome to the second part of our small series about dealing with contrast in the Darktable. And this time we will try to treat those raw files which already have a lot of contrast and also a high dynamic range. Before we start this, I will highly recommend to watch the first part, especially the beginning, where I have shown how to use or how to set up Darktable to be able to use that modern so-called scene referred workflow, and how to add your own group with modules that you use often so that you don't get distracted by the difference between my Darktable and your own. Okay, that being said, let's get started. This is how our first raw file looks like. I will add first those corrections and a bit of exposure so that we can recognize all details on the photo. And as you can see, we have the problem with direct sunlight. I shot this photo in the midday, and it's always a quite difficult daytime for shooting, because we always have those harsh shadows, or better to say harsh contrast in the shadows. So that is what we need to address first, and let's see what we need to address later. I would like to improve a bit the sky and details in the sky with the clouds. And third, I would like also to deal with that reflection in the water. And these are three elements that we need to address to improve this photo. So let's get started. To deal with those harsh shadows, we will use Filmic. And opposite to the last episode, we will compress our dynamic range, and compression will help us to get these details in the shadows, as you can see. And I could add just a bit more contrast in Look tab, relieve our shadows so that we have those details back here. And I could immediately go to the color balance RGB because we need a bit more saturation or color intensity. So I will do this without explaining it, because I've explained that in the last episode. So I will add a bit vibrance, a bit global chroma, add some saturation in shadows, midtones, and remove it from highlights. As you can see, we're getting another kind of contrast based on colors here. I will enhance that even more with Perceptual Brilliance grading. So let's see, how far should I go? I don't know, maybe even more. And I think we are finished in this with this module. And as you can see, I have improved a bit overall look of the photo, and I have those details here. So I've prepared it for further editing when we will deal with those details. So let's address our sky now. I would like to darken it a bit, and therefore I will use next instance of color calibration. We will use the same functionality like in the last episode. We'll go to the brightness tab and darken blue channel. as you can see, we have now more definition in the sky, but I don't want to do it globally. So I will add gradient mask for that. I will turn, I will turn the opacity 100% on. Maybe adds a bit curve to that gradient. And now I will compensate the darkening by adding a bit green luminance to our picture, so that we have something like that. Let's see before and after. Let's turn off mask indicator to see it better. And as you can see, I have now darker sky, and I have also improved that contrasts in the clouds. Now that definition of the clouds is much better to see. Okay, let's see what should be the next step. I will add a bit of local contrast now, and I would like to lighten this part here, these reflections with clouds. So I will use new instance of exposure module for that and mask it with drone mask. This is so-called dodge and burn. And let's see how far we need to go. How about opacity? Let's have 100% opacity of the mask, add a bit feathering, and turn off our mask indicator so that we can see better, and add some exposure. Okay, it looks good. We don't need to do anything else. Maybe not too much, just a tiny bit less. Something like that. Okay, now we have a nice balance between the sky and the reflections. And let's see what should we do next. And now we can also improve contrast in those areas, in the sky and in the reflection. We have enough contrast in the middle, so I can use tone equalizer for that, but I will go to the color balance again, just to demonstrate what else can be done with that powerful tool. So I will add a new instance. Let's bring that photo a bit near. And first I would like to mask those areas again. So let's use our drone mask again. Maybe a bit more feathering here and one more for the sky. Doesn't need to be so much precise. Something like that. We need to have 100% opacity on both masks. Excuse me. Let's activate this one. 100% opacity. Add some feathering and see how the masks look like. Yeah, that's nice. So turn off mask and mask indicators, and now we can go to our perceptual brilliance grading, because we don't need to add any color intensities. We need only to add some contrast there. So let's see how far we can go. Something like that. We can also use contrast here. And this contrast is not suitable to add it in overall picture, but only in some places like this. And we have also the possibility in the mask tabs to adjust a bit contrast gray fulcrum. I will just click on the color picker so that I have automatically adjust that, and also white fulcrum. And now we are fine with that contrast here. What that means we'll deal in next episode, but now it will be too much. I can also go to 4 ways tab and add some highlights, grain and power back, for example. And as you can see, we have added a lot of contrast in these areas without touching that middle area, which already has too much contrast. So maybe I go back to the first color balance just to add a bit more of chroma, maybe in mid parts. Let's see how far should we go, and something like that, and shadows also a bit. And as you can see, we have improved our photo quite a bit. Now we need to control how the sky looks now. So we need a bit of denoising here. Let's do it real quick. I like to use wavelets for that. It gives much better results. Now first you can click on the wavelets auto so that you have that automatic adjustment, and you can just tiny bit adjust outer set parameters and strength, and then go back and see how it looks if in wavelets, and if we need some further adjustments, but I don't think this is necessary. As you can see, we have a nice sky without those problems. The one problem that we have is my lenses are quite dirty, but I don't want to deal with that here. It will take too much time. And as you can see, we are finished now with this one. Let's see how it looks before and after. We go back to the exposure, add snapshot, activated snapshot, and go to the last step, and you can see it's quite different. You can see it clearly. We didn't lose too much details here. Maybe I could add, but because we have enough room, maybe I could add just a tiny bit more exposure, something like that. Now we have full dynamic range here without any issues. Let's turn our indicator on and everything looks nice. And now again, before and after, it's quite a difference. Okay, that's enough for this photo. Let's see what can we do for the next one. Here we have quite interesting raw file, because in this scene we have already predefined point of interest. These two people nicely illuminated together with this part of the field, and that will be our main subject in this photo. And we need to think about how to improve that. Now we have to deal with this harsh shadows again. We need to darken a bit the field above so that we have a nice framing of that scene. And I must say that is one of the reasons why I don't like base core, which have predefined look that disables you to view your photo on your own way. You are practically forced to follow that look from that base core or that camera JPEG. And it's much better to have that flat look and that you can decide alone what is your point of interest there. Okay, enough talking. Let's see how can we improve this. And first we start with Filmic like before, or no, excuse me, we turn on our length correction, chromatic aberration, and give our photo just a tiny bit of exposure. We need to have a bit room above, and then go to Filmic, compress it to get those details in the shadows back, and maybe add a tiny bit contrast here, relieve shadow parts, and immediately go to the color balance, add vibrance, chroma, shadows, midtones, highlights to have that contrast even more, and of course improve it a bit with Perceptual Brilliance grading. Now we have a nice starting point to deal with details. Now we will try to highlight our main motif by adding a bit luminance to that part and darken the rest. So we will use exposure module for that again, a new instance with mask, drone mask of course. So we, just a moment, I need to disable snapshot. Now let's mask it first, maybe not too much feathering, and of course 100% opacity. Add a tiny bit feathering and let's see how it looks like as a mask. Yeah, okay, maybe it's enough. Let's see first when we add a tiny bit of exposure there, maybe even more, and then now we can go back to first exposure and darken the rest and play a bit with these values. Let's see how far should we go. Maybe something like that. Now we need to improve it even more, and therefore we will use low pass module again, because we need this soft contrast between those areas. So we go with radius quite high, remove saturation, choose RGB scene for blending, and use multiply blend mode. Add a bit brightness to that, blend fulcrum. Let's see how far should we go, and turn a bit opacity off, that we don't have too much of that contrast. Maybe something like that. Let's see before and after. And we are done with our soft contrast. Now our photo is tiny bit hazy, so I will add a local contrast a bit. Let's see how far should I go, maybe that much. Oh, that's too much. Let's go back and protect our shadows from influence of local contrast. Let's see before and after. It's enough. And now I would like to introduce a new model. It's not new, but a new possibility to deal with colors and brightness. I would like to enhance a bit texture on this field, and therefore I will use color lookup table. Color lookup table is one of the modules which works in display referred workflow, and it's not good for scene referred workflow, but I will use it just a tiny bit corrections, and I don't think we will have any issues there. And I hope that we will have in future something like that, because it's quite nice tool to deal with colors and brightness. Okay, how it works: we have here a lot of patches and already a lot of colors. We can, for example, go to the green, darken it a bit, And as you can see, we have already a bit of texture here. But we can also change color of some of these patches, replace it with color that we need. For example, I would like to add a bit lightness to those yellowish part of the grass, so I turn on color picker, go to this area. Now that color table indicates that this color is quite near to this green that we have, but I don't want that green. I need that green which is much more yellowish. Now I can use another patch to replace that color with that green that I want. So I pressing Shift key, hold that key, go to some of these patches and click with left mouse button, and now I have replaced that color with color of the color picker. Now we can add some lightness to that. Just see how much should we go. No, that's too much, just tiny bit less. Maybe add tiny bit saturation to that. And let's see how it looks before and after. Now you can see we have even more definition and distinction between our illuminated area and the rest. And I will also try to darken a bit this field. So the same procedure, I go with my color picker somewhere. I get indication that this color is quite near to this one, but I want this one. So I'm pressing Shift key, go to that patch, and with left mouse click I replace that color, and now I can deal with this color. So I would like to darken it just tiny bit, maybe even more. Not too much. And we are done here with color lookup table. Maybe it's just too much here. Let's go back tiny bit. It's very important not to go too far, because you can fairly quick have some issues, so be careful if you use color lookup table. Okay, before and after. Now that's nice. That's all what we need to do with color lookup table. Okay, now I would like to address this dark area here. I will just brighten tiny bit of these shadows here, so that we can see a bit more details here. And I will use for that tone equalizer. And as you have seen in the last episode, we have used this tool, this module, for adding contrast as some kind of curve. But now we will try just to selectively brighten some areas, in this case this one. And I will try to explain just a little bit how tone equalizer works. Now, if you start Tone Equalizer and go to the first tab, Simple tab, you can see a lot of sliders. These are, so to say, different shades of gray we have, or better to say, zones. Tone Equalizer is based on Ansel Adams' zone system, but I don't want to go too deep in that. What is interesting, we have a lot of gray zones which are different from each other by luminance. So we have here the first top part are the shadows, and then we go up until our highlights. And how it looks like can be better shown in the next tab, Advanced tab. Those sliders here in Simple tab are represented here by points of the curve, and you can see we have our histogram so that we can see which point influences which kind of shade of gray. For example, these points, these last points on the left, are influencing our shadows. Maybe to show something like that. These are those zones. These are shadows, and then midtones, and then highlights. Now, what is very important is that Tone Equalizer is quite sophisticated by transition between those zones. They are quite nice. Tone Equalizer use a special mask as template for that separation of the zones, and how it looks we will show you by go to Masking tab. And we have now a lot of sliders. That's not very interesting for us. What is interesting are those two parts, those two sliders. These are mask exposure compensation and mask contrast compensation. Okay, what are those sliders? What can we do with these sliders? I will now enable that mask, that internal mask, which Tone Equalizer use as template for separation of the gray zones. And as you can see, we have some kind of blurry version of our photo, and those different shades are our zones. So for example, we have here that highlight zone. Let's go back quick to the advanced tab so you can see what is going on. When I'm going with my mouse to that point, you can see that line there. Now if I'm going to the next shade, you see that point down there, and when I'm going to the shadows, this one is the zone of the shadows. So let's say that is our border here. Let's see where is our highlights border, somewhere here. So let's add also one line there. Now, the nice thing by Tone Equalizer is possibility to adjust this mask. And we're going back to the masking, and we can adjust this mask by using that mask exposure compensation slider. I will try to adjust it automatically first, and as you can see, this gray slider comes in the middle. And let's see what happens if I go back to the advanced. Now I have shifted my dynamic range of that photo so that fits in this complete area. So I can use every point here to influence those different gray zones. So I have adjusted the mask so that I have covered whole dynamic range of my photo. That is this slider, mask exposure compensation. And because my dynamic range is quite narrow, it's not so high, it fits without problem here. But it can be that you have much higher dynamic range, so you need to adjust the contrast of that mask now you can tighten it a bit or brighten. In this case, we don't need to do anything. You see, I have now some issues. I'm going overboard here on the shadows, so you don't need to deal with that normally, but in some cases maybe you need to adjust also the contrast of that mask so that this part can fit in our range of zones. Now, that's all what you need to know how to adjust the mask. Let's see how we can deal now with our different shades. So we go back to advanced. I will delete these red lines. And now look how my mouse cursor indicates where I am. Now I can use this indication. I turn off that mask and now I have the same indication only on the mouse cursor. And I go to the place that I want to adjust. For example, I want to add in shadows a bit brightness. So I go to that area and with mouse wheel, turn the mouse wheel a bit up, and I have brightened only this area, which is defined by the mask, and mask looks like that. In this area, you see, I've adjusted only this part, and that is important for me. So let's turn the mask off, and you can see I've just added a bit brightness on that shades. I could also, for example, now darken a bit highlights. So I go there where the highlights are, and now I can move my slider down and I have darkening those parts, but I don't want to do this. So I go back. I need that bright area. Maybe I can also add a bit brightness here, but I don't need that also, so let's go back. The point is to get just a tiny bit of brightness in the darks. I can also move those points here, so I don't need to move that with mouse wheel and adjust it also there, or go to the simple tab, and this is the same. Every of these sliders is also the point here. So it's quite handy, and I like that masking because, as you can see, the transitions between those gray zones are quite soft, so we don't lose our contrast there when we're adjusting some of those zones. So that's very nice possibility. You can also, if you think this kind of masking is not good for you, you can try other possibilities by preserve details. You have an averaged guided filter, average guided filter, and so on, and you can turn off the preservation of details here. Let's see how it looks now. This is without preservation of details, excuse me. Average, there's no much difference, but you need to look only this part. Guided filter, maybe is the guided filter nice for this area. Average AGF and that one. So I will use average guided filter because, or what was the guided filter, because it's much better for this case. Okay, now you can add smoothing diameter, remove it back or something else. I will highly suggest to experiment. You don't need to understand every physics and math behind that. Just try, experiment. You can see immediately how it works. Okay, I hope you can understand now a bit more how tone equalizer works, and we don't need to use much time for that in this episode. If you have any questions, you can ask in YouTube or go to Pixel Us and ask your questions there. Okay, now we are finished with Tone Equalizer. We have those details back, as you can see. And let's see what we need to do next. Okay, I would like to add just a tiny bit more of color intensity with our color balance RGB, maybe in shadows a tiny bit. I don't know, maybe a bit more contrast, something like that. I've used luminance here for adding brightness in highlights, and I think we are finished here. We don't need to do anything else. So let's see how it looks before and after. I don't know, where should I go? For example, balance correction maybe. Yes, that's nice. Take a snapshot, activate it, go to last step, and let's see how it looks before and after. And you can see I adjusted that photo to my tasting. For me, this part is the viewpoint, and I've enhanced it. I've darkened the rest so that I have a nice framing of that middle point, and that's very important when you deal with your photos, to know what needs to be done. Don't let some automatic things doing things for you. For example, one slider solution for contrast or something like that. Please take your time, and you can improve your photos much better if you use your own intuition and don't be a slave of some automatic things. Okay, that's enough for this photo. Let's see what we can do with the next one. Okay, this is our last photo for today, and I will just turn on some corrections, add some exposure, so that we can be able to see much better what are we dealing with here. Similar to the last photos that I've shown today, we have also that problem with harsh shadows or harsh contrast, especially in this area here. And that will be the first point that we need to address. But what else needs to be done? As you can see, we have a nice house with those ducks here, and this is for us our main viewpoint. So we need to darken a bit background so that our viewpoint get much better attention. And let's see how can we do this. So let's start with Filmic. Same procedure as last time. As you can see, now we have much better shadows here. They are not so harsh. I will add just a bit contrast, relieve the shadows, and we are done with Filmic. Now we can go to the color balance RGB, improve it a bit more by adding some color intensity. Nothing special. I have done it a lot of times, so I don't need to explain what I'm doing here. And as you can see, it looks quite nice now. So let's see what will be the next step. The next step will be separation between foreground and background, as I said before. So we will use color calibration for that, and our brightness tab. And then we will darken the green a bit, because that is our background now. Add some brightness to the red channel, Maybe darken a bit the blue also. Something like that. Before and after. Now we can see that house and the ducks a bit better. Let's go even further. Okay, something like that. And we are finished with color calibration. I will also like to add a bit local contrast to enhance the fine details, protect the shadows from influence. And now I will use again our color lookup table to deal with that green area even more. So let's start that. I will darken greens a bit more, just a bit more like that. And now I'd like to darken also these yellowish greens. So let me zoom a bit. Choose that color, I don't know, something like that here. And now I will replace this suggestion here with that color that I've chosen, and shift key, and I have it now. Let's darken that area. As you can see, now we don't have so much contrast there. Let's see before and after. I will also influence a bit the colors of ducks and house, so let add some brightness to the brown colors, and maybe even, let's see if that works, go here, choose this lighter color, and I don't know, I can replace this patch, go just tiny bit higher, and now we have add a bit more contrast to our ducks and our house. So before and after, now we have even more difference between our foreground and background. So let's see what can we do next. I would like to address this harshness in background a bit more, and for that I will use quite nice tool Contrast Equalizer. So I will remove that coarse, that harsh contrast from the grass here. So let's do this. Go to the Luma, of course, and bring those points down so that we have something like this. It looks quite flat now, but also we have add some haze, so we need to deal with that. And since 3.6 Darktable, we have also one more possibility to add some mask, and this time this will be details threshold or detail mask. It's quite handy. I will turn our masking on so that you can see what is going on. And now if I pull that slider on the right, I've chosen only those areas which already have a lot of details. As you can see, only detailed area is masked. I can go in opposite direction and choose areas which don't have so much details. So it's quite handy for some things, especially for this case what we now have. So I go back. I can adjust the mask a bit more. Now it's too much, something like that, because we only need to deal with those harsh areas, and maybe add a bit feathering to that. And let's see how it looks like now. As you can see, we don't have any hazing now. Let's see before and after. We flattened a bit those harsh contrasts, and maybe I don't want to influence every scale, excuse me. Let's bring our fine details back. I don't know how much, maybe something like that. And now it looks much better. Let's see how it looks. Detailed. Okay, my photo is quite unsharp. I didn't have possibilities to shoot it better. But let's add some sharpness to that. Also with no new instance of contrast equalizer. And add that sharpness only to fine details. Something like that. I don't know how far should I go. I don't need, no, it's too much. Let's turn it off and try again. I don't want to introduce that harshness again, only to sharpen it a bit. Something like that maybe. So let's see before and after. Yeah, it's nice. Okay, let's see what can we do. What can we do next? So the last step will be a bit dodging and burning. I would like to give more attention to this central part with our ducks. So we will use a next distance of exposure module, mask it with drone mask. Just a moment, need to activate it. Okay, now maybe add some feathering there, and also here by refining of mask, and 100%. Let's see how mask looks like. Okay, that's nice. So tiny bit of exposure, something like that, and maybe remove overall exposure just a bit down. Okay, and maybe I would like to add tiny bit of that color in, I don't know, midtones here, or in shadows too, so that I have a nice saturation. Okay, I think it's okay now. I could no, that's enough. It's okay for this case, as you can see. And let's see how it looks before and after. We are going to exposure here, take snapshot, go to the last step. We need to activate that snapshot, and you see it's quite a difference. Let's go to the, let's zoom into the details so that we can see much better. Let's do that again. Go to exposure, take snapshot, activate it, go to last step, and you can see it's a quite difference. You can see that we don't have any harshness there. We have a little bit, but it's not disrupting, as you can see. And we can see our ducks much clearer. So that is everything what we need to do for this photo, and we are done with our dealing with contrast in Darktable. So before I finish this episode, I would like to make some small teaser for the next episodes of Darktable, for the next small series. And for that I will use this photo, duplicate it, and I will make some small changes. I will use color calibration for that, new instance. And what I want to do is to change a bit a color on the horizon here on our sky. Now, as you can see, color calibration have a lot of possibilities, and one option that we haven't used now that will be interesting for the next episode are those three tabs. RGB. That is a nice functionality which you can find everywhere in other photo software or even in video editing software. That is so-called channel mixer. I will just demonstrate a bit how to deal with that without explanation, because we will explain those things in the next episodes. So let's start. I will go to the red channel, remove some redness with something just a little bit with input green and input blue, go to green. Excuse me, I need to compensate that by adding a little red, something like that. Go to green, add a bit green with input blue, maybe not so much, so a tiny bit, and compensate it by removing green and input green. And I don't want to influence the whole sky with that color. I would like to have some nice transition between horizon and the rest of the sky, so I will use a drone mask for that. Let's see, something like that. Of course, opacity, I need to adjust opacity a bit. Something like that. And maybe feathering radius. Let's see how it looks before and after. And that is what I will call some kind of Nordic sky, because at the horizon it looks like a clean greenish sky with nice transition between that greenish part, blue with the greenish part, to the blue with that reddish or violet part. I quite like this transition, and that will be subject of our next episode. And when I'm looking on my picture, it looks like some kind of template for Bob Ross Joy of Painting series. You know, that happy little bushes and this tree needs a friend kind of paintings. By the way, I highly suggest to watch some of these episodes, because you will learn a lot about dealing with colors, and that is quite interesting. And now we are finished with our episode, and stay tuned, happy painting, and bye bye.